Hey there, it's Chris from Good Roads, and I am attempting to build a snowboard using super low-tech DIY methods. And a huge part of my motivation for trying to do that is what feels like the enormous number of router templates that I had to design and fabricate for my last snowboard build. Y'all, I'm feeling lazy. I don't want to do all that CAD work. I don't want to print out a whole bunch of sheets of paper and then tape them together and fix them on the back of a board, and you get the idea. It's a lot of work. What's more is I'm not at a place in my personal snowboard building journey where I'm satisfied with my designs, which means that putting all that effort into templatizing designs that I'm not even sure I'm gonna like, it flies in the face of my prototype should be fast and easy attitude. So there has got to be a cheaper, simpler, easier way to try making snowboard shapes. So this week, I'm going to attempt to make the base sheet of my snowboard. Probably the most critical component of the whole build because it sets the tone for the shape of the entire board going forward. It's also one of the places in the past that required the most router work. I'm going to attempt to make that using simple tools and very manual, very uncomplex layout techniques. Let's see if we can't simplify this nonsense. For my base sheet, I'm going to be using some ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene, which also goes by the names UHM and PTEX. This plastic has been treated specifically for ski and snowboard building. One side of it has been sanded and flame treated so that it will bond better with epoxy. This is a spare sheet that I had in the shop for my projects last year, but if you want to grab some for yourself, I'll have links to suppliers down below. The absolute easiest way to do this step of the build would be to just trace the shape of a snowboard that you already have and like. That is totally valid. But I'm trying to make a bit of a weirder geometry, sort of a chopped powder focus board, so I'm gonna do the next best thing. And to do that, I need to start by giving myself, can you guess? That's right, a center line. With that in place, I'm going to transfer some of the dimensions over from my core, giving myself markings for my binding inserts and the ends of the core itself. Next, we're going to get started on the most critical aspect of a board shape, the side cut radii. These are the curves that come in on the sides of the board that, when you lean on an edge, create the arcs that allow the board to turn. Pretty freaking important. And I want mine to be centered right between my feet, so I measured the distance between my binding inserts and gave myself a center mark. Next, I need to measure the width of the waist of my board, which is the narrowest section. I just took a measurement off my old deck, keeping in mind that the edge wire itself will add a bit of thickness to the equation. Yeah, that's about right. Something like 9 5/8. I used that measurement to mark my waist at the center of my side cut radii. And with that done, it's time for the fun part. The weird part? Definitely the interesting part. Just like the name suggests, the side cut radius is just a section of a circle. And in the case of a snowboard, it's a rather large circle. The side cuts for the board that I'm making are actually going to be relatively small for a snowboard. They're going to be clocking in with a radius of about 6 meters or 20 feet. I think it's fair to say that I don't have a circle template that big, so I'm going to try something a little different. I cleared out a huge section of my shop. Then I measured out about 20 feet of string. The next thing I need is a very long, very straight line. So I grabbed a chalk line and tacked down one end. I ran the line out a bit more than 20 feet, pulled it tight, and snapped my line. I want my side cuts to be square to the sides of my board, so I laid out some tape lines square to my chalk line. And then I also laid down a tape line that will mark the center of my side cut. With that in place, I can get my base sheet blank aligned and tacked down in place. I tied a Sharpie to one end of my string, fixed the tip of the marker down at the inside of my board's waist, and fixed the other end of the string down 20 feet away on my chalk line. The idea was that I could use the string as a radius to draw the arcs of my side cut, but I ran into some issues. First of all, the string was fairly elastic, and I had to keep a very constant tension on the line to get a consistent arc. Secondly, the string was getting caught up on the rough texture of the concrete floor, and that messed up the radius of the curves. Oh man, it's getting like caught on the floor. It's making this difficult. There we go. I think that's the one right there. So what I wound up with was a really messy sort of approximation of the curve I wanted. This technique is pretty cool in theory, but the way I tried to execute it it didn't work out. A 20-foot piece of wood or something rigid like that would absolutely make this work, but I didn't have any material like that on hand, so I had to figure out something else. And here's what I came up with. Based on the rough curves I got from my string method, I drove 2 screws into my bench and measured the center between them. Then I grabbed a flexible piece of metal that I can push against those screws and bend into an arc. For what it's worth, I'm not really sure if this gives you more of a true arc, as in a section of a circle, or if it's more parabolic, but I think it's going to work for my purposes either way. I lined up the center of my side cut with the center of my screws and flexed the metal until it made an arc with the peak at the waist of my board. I marked that line with a different color because all of those black lines were starting to make a mess. And when that was done, I immediately went over to the bandsaw to slice off my side cuts. I wanted to make those cuts before I do any further layout so I don't get lost in the sauce of all the ink lines all over the place. I grabbed a razor blade and used it to scrape my cuts and remove any spare plastic to clean up the edges. Alright, now for the fun part. This is where we get into the real artistry of board design. I'm starting by laying out the nose of my board. I'm looking for a bit of a shovel nose, so I used a compass to lay out a nice gradual arc at the tip of my board. I drew myself some reference lines and then gave myself a subtle taper from the contact points of my board up to the nose. Next, I grabbed this very precise circle drawing tool. Wait, what do you mean that's a roll of tape? My friend, this is a multi-$1,000 drafting tool. Surely, you're daft. I would never use such a simple found object to make such a complex shape. Then I subdivided some of my angles just to smooth them out a bit. For the tail, I'm going for something blunt and chopped, so I drew myself an arc to give it just the slightest swallow shape. And then I used a roll of tape I had lying around to draw some arcs. I don't know what you're talking about. I would never spend a ton of money on a tool when I can do the same job with a common household object. Use what you got. I sort of extended out my side cut angles and my layout is done. It's over to the bandsaw for shaping. I grabbed the razor and cleaned up my edges. And there it is. From the top, with all those layout lines all over it, it looks a bit of a mess. But flip that bad boy over and damn, that is a fun looking shape. And there she blows! a snowboard base sheet laid out completely manually. So no computers, no CAD, no printed templates that need to be taped together, no dual-sided router templates that need to be fixed in place, just some simple tools, some patience. Pretty freaking cool. For what it's worth, I'll probably take a sanding block to the edges of this off camera just to sort of smooth out some of the curves, but I'm really excited with how this came out. The side cut radii, they're actually pretty tight for snowboarding, but in the research that I've been doing, a tight radius like that will actually help out a lot in the sort of powder tree run riding that I intend to use this board for. So, and I mean, I wish you guys could see it. I can't get it all in frame, but this shape is a shape that has been evolving over the course of many snowboard and powder surfer builds, and this is my favorite one by far so far. It just looks like it's gonna work, and it also looks nice. Like aesthetically, I find it to be very pleasing. And like I said, this is the most critical component of the build. The base sheet determines the shape of the edges, and the edges are your routing template after the board's all pressed together that allow you to cut out the shape of the board. So it is great to feel like this step came out so well, even though there were a couple minor string-related hiccups. So that's gonna be it for this week. If you wanna see the progress on this board right here, or a ton of other awesome DIY board sport stuff, just go ahead and subscribe. If you wanna support the channel, why not join these fine folks right here who pitch in just a little bit every month so that I can afford materials like ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. If you got any questions or comments, leave them down below, and hey, share the video with your friends. That would be cool. Why don't you do that? As always, I love having you guys along for the ride, so until next time, oh, this is gonna be floppy. I'll see you soon. Boing. Boing. Sound effects from old cartoons.